Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Roy Lingam. I'm the founder of DelphiUSMLE Prep Center, where we train the students for USMLE exam. And I'm also currently a part of a Confide hair transplant clinic, and I'm in the hair transplant industry. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Sri Lanka. I moved to England. I did undergraduate in human anatomy, then part of medical school, then moved to US for clinical rotations and completed my clerkships and internships. So I am an IMG who's exposed to all the process that you have to go through. With this experience, we prepared a video that helps you to understand how the USMLE exam works and also how the residency application works. And please watch this video. And if you have any questions, reach out to us anytime and we'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you. We talk about this, right? So now the first thing I want to bring it here. Some of you guys know, those who don't know, maybe this can help. At the goal of coming to US is to start the residency program in the United States, right? So everybody wants to start the residency. The residency is basically your training internship, okay? So it's a minimum 3 years. It can go maximum 5 years, depends on what field you choose. For example, internal medicine, 3 years, surgery, 5 years. Now, residency goes throughout the United States. Every state, every hospital who has the program to train doctors, they accept residency. Now, in order to qualify or in order to be a part of residency, you need to match to that hospital. The matching is a program, it's actually a process where all the applicants apply and they have to match with that particular program. So that's why we call it matching, and matching happens once a year. So if you, let's say the matching happens usually in March. If you miss that matching in March, then you have to wait for the entire next year match for the next matching. Okay, so it's once a year. But before you even go to matching, there is a requirements. In order to participate in matching, you need to have ECFMG certification. Now, what is ECFMG? That's an Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. So there is a committee in the United States. It's located in Philadelphia. They are the one who does those matching and everything. So what they do is they want to make sure these people are actual doctors and they're qualified to practice medicine. Because, you know, doctors are coming from different countries. Somebody can have their own university and issue a degree saying, you know, they are doctors. So that doesn't mean they can practice. So what they do, they have their own certifications. Once you have ECFMG certification, you are qualified to apply for residency in the United States. So that's like a license to apply. Without ECFMG certificate, you can't even log into the website to apply. So that's how it works. Now the question comes, how do I get the ECFMG certification? ECFMG certification consists of these 3 exams: USMLE Step 1, USMLE Step 2 CK, and there's something called ASCII, which is a practical exam. So we're going to talk about each of them, okay? Now, that all 3 exams must be done and you have to pass in order to get the ECFMG certification. Now, each exam you could take multiple times. It's not that, you know, they want you to pass on the first time, but you could take up to 4 times. But they could see how many times you have taken this exam when you go for interview. So when you go to the hospital for interview, for matching or residency interview, they see it, how many times you have taken it. You cannot hide that. Everything is visible to them, okay? So even though they say, for example, you could take Step 1 4 times, we want the student to pass on the first time, because if you are going to interview, let's say you pass on the first time, somebody else comes with 2 attempts, you get the priority to match at that time, okay? Some hospitals, for example, in Chicago, I was with Mount Sinai, Chicago, in internal medicine, they don't even take people to interview if they have a second attempt on Step 1. So when they apply, they filter how many people have passed on the first attempt and the second attempt. There are hospitals who will give you, each hospital has different requirements, okay? Now, what ECFMG tells you, as long as you pass these exams with multiple attempts up to 4 times, we will give you the certification. That's not a problem. So somebody can take step 1 4 times, step 2 CK 4 times, still get the ECFMG certification. But that doesn't mean they are guaranteed to get a residency spot. Does that make sense? So they look for the attempts first, okay? So how many times they have taken it. Now, these are individual hospital requirements. It's not the federal. Every hospital, depending on how comparative, they come up with their own requirements. For example, as I said, I could only speak for certain hospital. Mount Sinai has their own requirement. They say our program is one of the top programs, so we're not going to take any candidate who has step 1 in multiple attempts. They have to pass on the first. So how do they know? When the matching comes, you apply for the hospital. There is a ECFMG is a third-party company, send your application to hospitals. The hospital can fix it on the computer and filter. Let's say, and I'll give you a good example. In Mount Sinai, they pick every year 6 residents for internal medicine, okay? Now I was told 9 residents, but let's say 9 residents every year. For 9 spot, they receive 2,000 applications. So now, how do they bring 2,000 to 9? Is the residency process. And for 9 spot, they call about 150 interviews. So they invite 150 residency applicants and they interview 150 people. In that 150, they pick 9 people. So the question should be, how do they do from 2,000 to 150? First thing, they will put it on the filtering. Whoever passed on the first attempt, 2,000 become 900 because so many people with multiple attempts that they applied. So now 900. In that 900, they will put step 2 CK about 225, for example. That will bring it to 400. And then they will, so these are filters. They keep adding it. And then they have different filters. Some of the filter, they will put US citizen, green card holders, that even filters. Like for example, Mount Sinai internal medicine, if you don't have a green card or US citizen, you cannot even apply their residency program because that's a minimum requirement. See, that brings up to 250 applications at the end of the day. In that 250, they're gonna pick 150 applicants. There, they're going to look at your personal statement, how interesting your personal statement, many other criteria to get to the interview. You see, when they call you for interview, in order to get that interview itself, how many doors you have to open and pass those things. Now, some of the time, people don't even get interviews is because they didn't even get picked up in that application process because they had attempts and stuff, right? So I'm not telling if you have multiple attempts, you will not match. No, absolutely not. I'm sure 50% of the residents they match in the United States have some attempts somewhere, but it makes it harder. Sometimes you come and tell, hey, I am from Illinois, I live in Chicago, I want to go to Chicago hospital. If you want what you want, then you have to have enough credential to go for it. Sometimes what happens is, like I've heard that somebody lives in Chicago, had multiple attempts on steps. They still match, but not in Illinois. They have to go to Wyoming, some rural area and different areas. Sometimes they won't get what they want. If you want to go to general surgery, if you have an attempt, you might not get general surgery. You may end up getting pediatrics. So, different things involved in different talk, right? So that's how the residency application process works. Now, with talking about USMLE, USMLE step 1 is an exam that checks your knowledge on your basic sciences. When you say basic sciences, these are your first 3 years of medical school, some medical school 4 years, right? So what does step 1 consist of? Anatomy, physiology, pathology, pharmacology, microbiology, and immunology. All those basic subjects is your step 1. Step 2 CK, it's your clinical rotations. Those are clinical subjects, okay? So that's the idea. Now, when it comes to step 1, at this point, it's either pass or fail. There is no scoring, which is good because when we took step 1 15 years ago, not only we have to pass, but you also have to pass with a high score. That's a double stress get added to us because sometimes we know we are passing, but then we need to increase the score. Now it's not like that. You just pass. I think that's much better. It reduces the stress for students because they are not fighting for the scoring. You pass, that clear the step 1. Of course, step 2 CK is still scored, so which means you have to score high. And I still think it's much better because, for example, I scored 237 on my step 1 when I took it. When you score 237 and step 1, it adds double stress because they always want you to do better on step 2 CK. So I have to do step 2 CK more than 237. If not, they think that I wasn't too serious, my score went down. So now that effect is not there. So you study, pass step 1, and then you move on to step 2 CK and then do the physical exams. Now, there is one more USMLE, what we call USMLE step 3. Step 3 is not required to do before residency. Most of the time people do in first year of residency, you do the step 3. So step 3 is done while you are doing internship. But a lot of foreign students, what they do, once you pass step 2 CK, it's very easy to study for step 3 because similar material, they also take step 3 before the residency application process. So it's like you're adding a bonus on your application. Like if you pass step 1 and step 2 CK and step 3, pretty much 95% guarantee you're going to match somewhere that year, okay? Because you have done all these exams. Again, you don't have to do it, but doing it's a bonus. That's what the point is, okay? So if you don't, you could do it on the first year of residency. Now, why it's easy to do? When you're doing a residency, they only give you 2 weeks off to study for that exam, and you have to do it with the residency. The life of residency is difficult. You're already working 80 hours a day, week, and then you are studying for this exam with 2 weeks off. Is difficult. So I tell people, my students, the minute you pass step 2 CK, take a break and spend another month and a half, you could easily pass step 3. And when you do that, it makes your life much easier. So that's about USMLE. So are we clear with that part so far? Now, how to start the prep, right? So the first thing I recommend, you start with step 1. Even though some people say, I just graduated from medical school, so I am fresh with my clinicals, I want to do the step 2 CK first. It used to be like that, let's say 7, 8 years ago. Now it's very difficult because step 2 CK requires step 1 knowledge. You cannot answer step 2 CK question. Maybe you would answer 20% of question. I'll give you an example. Recently, a student who took step 2 CK had a question in glycogen storage disease. Glycogen storage disease is a pure biochemistry, right? And you cannot just answer that on step 2 CK. A lot of pathology and pathophysiologies are coming to step 2 CK. So the best way to study for step 1 first, which will give you almost 60% of the knowledge that requires for step 2 CK. Because when you're studying for step 1, you're already covering all the basic topic, pathology and pharmacology. All you're going to talk about step 2 CK is the clinical symptom and how to diagnose and treat. So which makes it much easier. Okay, so always step 1 is the first exam a student should be studying. That's our recommendation. But you could study anyways you want. But I've seen students, they start studying for step 2 CK. After spending 6 months, they say my scores are not improving. Then they go back to step 1 to review. So the ideal plan is to start with the step 1, then you go for step 2 CK and then follow on that. So that's the best way to do that. Start studying for step 1. One of the most important thing, step 1 exam, is it a difficult exam? Absolutely. Okay, it is one of the difficult exam in the planet because it's a USMLE, United States conducted exam. But is it impossible to pass? No. 10,000 student passes a year. So I don't see why any of the student cannot be in part of that 10,000 student. So in my experience, somebody who studied properly, prepare properly, planning properly, should not have any problem passing the exam. Now, the only thing is going to be different between students is the timing of preparation. There is no standard time. Like sometimes students ask me, how long does it take to study for step 1? It's individual based. I know students who pass in 3 months. I know students who pass in a month and a half. Like most of the American schools, they pass in 1.5 months of preparation. Some American students take 3 months. Excuse me. Some students take 6 months. So it's individual based of where you stand, how much you need to prepare. There's a lot of factors involved. The only way I could tell how long it takes to study for step 1, if I talk to you guys one-on-one, if I know what's your background, how much you have prepared, where you stand when it comes to step 1, okay? But at the end of the day, the most important thing to see this slide here, how to assess, to know where we are. See, very important thing is, when we studied here, from the day one, we were trained to pass step one. So we know what is USMLE from the day one we started medical school. Every day it's a USMLE. We hear that 10 times a day from the day one of medical school. So we are trained for that. But when a student studies abroad in a different countries, you guys only hear this word when the time comes, right? So first, what we need to know, you need to know where you stand, so we know how to plan for this. So for example, how much do you remember from immunology? How much do you remember from pathology, biochemistry? Because all these are basic topics. How much you remember from the first year? You have to assess where you stand, then you have to plan for the destination, okay? Now, how we do that? So for that, few things first. Whenever it comes to plan, I tell the students, first, discipline and routine is very important. So what does that mean? You plan to sit and say, hey, I'm going to give my next 3 months to USMLE step one. So you have to have a discipline every day to wake up at the same time and study at the same time and finish it. That discipline and routine is important, because it doesn't matter where you are. You probably, let's say, you need to learn more or you need to learn less. It doesn't matter who you are. If you don't have a discipline and routine, you cannot get to the destination, because this is a slow process. It's not that we study for 1 week and pass the exam. No, it's a long process. Being patient, maintaining your energy without getting bored, because once you start studying for USMLE, you are going to see these UWorld questions every day, first aid book every day. So you cannot get frustrated. Oh, I've been doing this every day. You have to have that patience to win this game. I tell them, USMLE, it's a journey. It doesn't end in a short period. Some people spend 2 years to pass all the step one, but they are patient enough to get that 2 years and move on, okay? So discipline and routine is the key. Now, next thing, consistency. Now, these are the things I speak to my student who takes my program, and I make sure they go through that. When we say consistency, studying every day is very important, because sometimes I hear, okay, they have some other event happening. I didn't study Tuesday, but I'm going to catch up on Wednesday. That doesn't work. It doesn't matter what happens around you. You need to have the consistency of studying every day. When you keep that every day, that's where you accumulate your knowledge, and then you learn more and more. Next one, when it comes to step one, USMLE, sleep plays a major role, because most of the people think that if I'm studying for step one, I just open the book and I study for 10 hours, I learn. No, absolutely not. I never seen them passing. The idea is, studying is one part of your preparation. So when you study for USMLE, keep in mind, folks, somebody might disagree now, but you will agree eventually when you start studying. Just sitting in front of the book for 15 hours would not get you past this exam. The whole atmosphere, the whole routine, everything has to change, which means you study 9 to 10 hours. I tell my students, if you put 100% and you study 9 hours a day, you do not need more than that to study for step one. Because I do hear from some part of Asia, they were like, oh, you have to study 15, 16 hours. Impossible. Your brain would not work after 9 hours. So you're basically fooling your brain saying, I'm studying. You're not going to learn anything. But when you study 9 hours, you put that 9 hours properly, 100%. No WhatsApp, no YouTube, nothing in that 9 hours. You will learn properly. After that 9 hours, you get enough sleep. Why the sleep is important? Whatever you learn need to be processed to long-term memory. The long-term memory happens in your REM sleep, which means you need to get your proper sleep so you could have enough REM sleep. The most painful thing is you studied the whole day, but you cannot remember next day. That hurts. I spent all 10 hours to study, but how come I don't recall the next day? Recalling is a big issue when you study for step one, because you are studying from the day 1 to 3 months. You have to remember most of them what you study. If you study and you started forgetting, that means it's nothing, because everything is going out. So sleep, 8 hours or minimum 7 hours gives you enough memory processing, folks. Sleep is important to clear out your neurotransmitters. I'm talking with the science evidence, okay? I'm not just saying sleep is important. You study throughout the day, and then you have fully accumulated neurotransmitters. You want that to be cleared. Brain has to have enough hormones, right? A good question comes to you, which hormone or neurotransmitters is important to study? Norepinephrine, because that gives you the concentration, isn't it, folks? How come people have more concentration in the morning, but throughout the day they don't have it? Because when we wake up early in the morning, our brain produces more norepinephrine. More norepinephrine gives you concentration to study. So the better sleep you get, the better focus you would have, so you could study properly. Okay, so that's sleep. Next comes to this. When you study for exam, there are two types of resources, right? This goes most towards the student who study for step 1 while they are in the medical school. When you are studying throughout your medical school, you use a different resource, but then when you have that dedicated time that you are studying for USMLE, you have a different resource. If you pick the wrong resource, you will go in circles and you will never be ready to take the test, and then it will take forever. A good example, a big theory book cannot be used when you study for USMLE, because that's when you study your normal medical school. When you study for USMLE, you need to stick to the resource, what is for USMLE. Okay, so now that brings you to the second question here. What resources do we use when we use for USMLE steps, right? Now, when specifically talking about the step 1 is written by many books, folks. Okay, so for example, if you go online or if you talk to people, they will tell you thousands of resources. There is this book, that book, so many resources out there. Somebody likes Anki, somebody likes Ambas, all these things. They did a study. You could check more detail on my website. They did a study in US, 3 top universities, to see which resources is used more and who passed the best. The research shows students who use first aid book and who did more questions end up passing more than using any other resource. Now remember, I don't work for first aid, I don't work for UWorld, I'm not advertising, I'm not marketing them, but these 2 resources are the best out there on step 1. Delphi, we use first aid. I could come up with my own book. It's not a big deal to write a book, but theory is the same, folks. I can't change the pathology of diabetes. It's the same, no matter who writes it. But first aid has what you need. Now, is first aid covering 100%? Absolutely not. They cover about 60 to 70% of what you need to know. What about the rest? UWorld. Does UWorld cover 100%? No. They have whatever is missing from first aid, they cover. Do you need to know 100% to pass this exam? Absolutely not. If you know first aid and UWorld, you will pass this exam without any problem. Okay. Now, I've been teaching for step 1 for 10 years. I only use first aid book and UWorld. I have done UWorld 32 times in the last 10 years. And I have gone through first aid. I go through first aid 5 to 6 times a year. So times 10 years. Okay. Now, the idea is, whatever NBME or any exam question you do, the answer is in these 2 resources. So the bottom line that I'm trying to make a statement here, if a student cannot pass step 1 with first aid and UWorld, they're not going to pass with anything else. Okay. Now, that's a very bold and a statement I make it, but I see it. These 2 are the most important, right? Some people say, oh, this is not enough, I need to bring CAP plan. Good luck with it, because you could bring so many, but then you will never finish it, right? Think, you're studying in a short period of time, what we need to learn. I'm going to show you a demo after I'm done here, how you use first aid and a UWorld incorporated, so how it makes a difference. Okay, so that's a resource here, folks. Now, when we use a first aid book, most of you guys seen the first aid book. It's a filtered information they do not explain, because they expect you to know that. So it's an information gives you. So the first aid book is like a syllabus. They want you to know, okay, know this topic, but you are expected to know. But unfortunately, not all the medical school teaches properly what's covered on the first aid. So what I do when I teach first aid, I dissect the topic and make it more understandable, simplify the topic and explain how and why. Then once you understand, it becomes easy to memorize. And once you memorize, then you have to do repeating what you memorize. You see, if you don't do those 3 parts, nothing is going to work here. Because if you don't dissect and understand, then you can't memorize properly, because it becomes very difficult to memorize without understanding. At the end of the day, medicine is memorizing, folks, okay? We don't have to be smart, but we have to be hardworking people in order to memorize. And once you memorize, then you repeat. If you don't repeat, you forget. It's a normal memory that after a few weeks, if you don't repeat, you forget. So that's how you do the first aid book. Then, of course, you go to the UL question bank. There are so many different ways you could do UL questions. So that's something I tell people as they enroll the program, how to do those things, because it will take so much time to do. But at the end of the day, you have to do UL questions. Now, every student who goes to take step 1 do UL question and they fail. So the question is, why did they fail step 1 exam after they do UL question bank? The answer to that is they did not utilize the UL properly. UL is an amazing tool, but it requires certain way of doing that question. More than doing a question, how much did you learn from the explanation? Some people say, I scored 75% in UL, but I didn't pass the exam. Well, scoring doesn't matter. How much did you learn from the explanation? Their explanation is a textbook box. You know, they say use the UL as a learning tool. Do not use it as an assessment tool. You cannot use assessment for UL. You know, you use the UL to learn. It has so much information. And I've been telling Dr. Carey that every time I do UL, I keep learning more things. You know, I did, as I said, 32 times, but I'm learning something new every time I do it because there's so much information to learn that. So that's first aid and UL. Now, the next question then you wanted to ask me is, so if you don't use that for assessment, so what do we use to assess and say, where are we or when are we ready to take the test? That's where the NBME comes. NBME is also part of ECFMG. So NBME writes an assessment test, and the same people who write the actual step 1. So people who write NBME write the actual step 1 questions. So what they have done, they come up with the NBME forms. So right now, I believe there's NBME 25 to NBME 31, which means there's a 6 test. Each one has a number. And we take NBME. When you take an NBME, it's going to tell you whether you pass or fail. So that's what we use to see where you are. That's how we assess. We do not take anything else to assess. And also, NBME tells you what's happening. Because think about it. You could be so good at UL, but if you don't pass the NBME, then nothing is happening, right? So we do NBME, and then once we do the NBME, then we see, how do you work with the NBME? So because most of the students, what I've heard, they do the NBME, and they say, I got 60%, I didn't pass. Well, that's not enough. I need to know, when you got 60%, where did you go wrong? So when you take the NBME and you have the incorrect, we dissect into this 5 categories. So let's take an example. I take an NBME today. I scored 65%, and which means I made about 70 mistakes. Okay, let's say for an example. Just knowing I made 70 mistakes doesn't help me to improve myself. I need to know in that 70 mistakes, where did I go wrong? What am I missing in this? So we divide that 70 mistake in this 5 categories. This is something I do to my student. This is my classification. So in that 70 mistake, I'm going to categorize how many questions I missed it because I simply forgot and couldn't recall, which means I understood, I knew this material, simply I forgot. That's one category. Then we put something called 50-50. What is 50-50? That means I'm able to break it down to 2 best options, but in the 2 best options, I picked the wrong answer. You know, that's the most common mistakes people make. The third one, I know the question, I know the material, but the way they asked the question, I didn't read it properly. I misinterpreted when you read the question and you made a mistake. 4th topic, these are new topics. That means I never covered. For the first time, I got a question in cystic fibrosis, but I never learned cystic fibrosis. Last one, how many questions you missed because you ran out of time. Now, when a student tells me, so any student of mine who take NBME, they cannot meet with me unless they have this breakdown, because this is the breakdown that will help me to see where they are going wrong. For example, I had a student a few days ago who took an NBME. Most of the mistake was in number 1 category, which means he made many mistakes where he couldn't recall. What does that tells me? he forgot his first aid book. He didn't review it in a long time. So when you make a mistakes like that, all we have to do is go back to your first aid, review to bring the memory back, because this is a topic that you understood once upon a time, you just simply forgot. Now, if another student comes, say that they make more mistakes in the new topic, which mean we didn't do enough UL question, so we have to go back and finish all the topic. See, if you don't analyze the NBME like this, you would never know where you are going wrong. Does that make sense, folks? So whether you take my program or any program, it doesn't matter. You should always analyze NBME like this. That's the only way you would know you are getting better. Just knowing that I got 60%, 70%, these are just numbers, doesn't tell you anything. You should always dissect. So, and then you could see it. When you take the next NBME, compare it. Are you getting better? Or are you getting, so that's the idea here, folks, okay? Always compare with that part. Now, that's how we analyze NBME. Is everybody clear with this? All right, so this is how a little bit of information of how I prepare students. And of course, you know, there's a long information. So the next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you a demo, how we teach or how we break down a topic. Even if you don't, again, if you are studying on your own, you can try this method and it will help you to understand better. Now, before I move on, any questions, Dr. Carey or anybody else?
I think we answered majority. I was answering some people back in the group chat. There are a lot of questions just in general, like how long a step score is valid for. All of these questions you guys can find online, honestly, with some basic Google research. I understand that, you know, when you're first hearing about this, you obviously want to know about these things. So definitely check out the USMLE website. That's going to be your main resource. NBME website is also going to be another good one to take a look at. ECFMG website. Those are all the websites that you pretty much want to have a bookmark for when it comes to your journey to becoming a physician in the States.
Both ways. So what I do to my students, I go through systems, and as I do system, we do some question in the systems of the topics to kind of see, because when you read the first aid, it's a passive learning, right? You're just reading, everything looks easy. But when you do the question, it's very difficult. Sometimes they don't even know what the topic is, right? So my suggestion is both way. So if, for example, if you are doing neurology today, do some question in neurology to see whatever you learn, are you applying? Now, once you've done first aid, then you're going to do full-time questions. So recorded, it's a live program. I come like this from Monday through Friday. We start at 7 o'clock in the morning, Chicago time, 7 in the morning till 11 o'clock, Chicago time, 4 hours. So what we do during this 4 hours, we go through this material, how we do it. And I do an average about 15 to 20 questions a day during the class. So after we finish at 11 o'clock, student takes a lunch break. And then what they do, they go back and review what I taught them, and they redo the same questions again. How do you get the same question? There's a question ID. You could go to UWorld, you could put the question ID and pull it up and then read the explanation, because I'm going through the question and answer, but I'm not spending time on the explanation. It is a student's responsibility to go through each explanation and learn. So this is your daily task for 6 weeks. By the time we finish 6 weeks, we finish the first aid book. After that, I create a schedule where you do UWorld question full time, morning till evening. All you do is UWorld. So that answer to Michael here, when you do questions, so in the beginning, first we do first aid and a little bit question goes with that topic. Once you covered the whole first aid, then you go full-time UWorld question, where morning till evening, we do about 2 blocks a day. To do properly 2 blocks, it takes about 8 hours, okay? Because you have not only answering, but you have to learn explanations too. So with us, what we do is, after 6 weeks, I meet with the student every week. They have to come and meet with me one-on-one. So after 6 weeks, there is no more group. They have to meet with me one-on-one. So I see how your questions are coming, how are you improving. So I guide them until the day of the exam, because our reputation comes when you pass the step 1, not just when you finish the 6 weeks program, okay? Now, so that's the key here. One of the things, I don't know if Dr. Carey mentioned, not everybody can enroll to our program. We select the students to our program. We only take 20 students per class. That's it. That's what I was asking. 90 people sign up for this. I said, our class is only 20 people. Why? When you keep a smaller number of students, it gives you more personal attention. It's also quality, right? When the quantity is low, quality is high, right? 200 students and, only few numbers are passing. So we have to be very careful. So when I say selection criteria, what do I mean by that? I speak to student one-on-one. So let's say if somebody is interested, they come on Zoom alone and I ask them question, how are they studying, what they have done in the past, where do they have, is languages okay? All these things I go through it. Then if I approve, then you could enroll in the program because, for me, I'm selfish. My reputation is important. If a student enroll and they take the program, they have to pass. And it's not only for me, and it's also your future. You're paying money and it's your future that determines this one. So we don't want to waste anybody's time and money, and it's a future. So that's why we tell them, we select the student for the class. Sometimes we only have 18 students a class. I'm okay with that. We don't want to fill it because somebody is available. We want to make sure they're willing to work hard. Number two, if a student says that, oh, they are doing many other things, I don't want them to be in my class because that means you're not going to give you 100% for step one. When you study for step one, it has to be focusing on step one because it's not an easy exam. There's a lot of things to consider, right? So I don't look for if you guys are smart or no, I don't care. As long as you are willing to work hard, I will train the student because with 10 years, I have experience of seeing different type of personality, different type of situation. I know what to do, but you see, I put my 100%, but the student has to put their 100%. If not, nothing becomes successful here, right? Because after I finish with the student, I believe whatever the student tells me. I don't see them what they exactly do, right? So that's why we are kind of careful. If you go to Delphi, you see a lot of testimonial. These are all my students who take the exam. They write those things. One advice I give it to students, it's okay if you are not taking our program. That's completely understandable, but always study properly, take some program. As a foreign medical graduate, I don't recommend to go take a step one without any program. Even if you know everything, it's good to go through a program so you have a good confidence because this is your future. It's a big investment for being a physician in the United States. Take some good programs. There are so many out there. Do a research and get some good program. Make sure you don't get the compulsive behavior where you study on your own, because most of the thing what I hear from foreign students is I tried to study on my own and then they fail, then they take a program. Why didn't you do that first in the place? Because once you take a step one, it cannot be deleted. It's on the system until you die. So even if you say, some people say after 7 years, I'm going to reapply so they won't remember. No, they remember how many times you took step one or step two CK. So we do not, take precautions before the damages happen, folks, right? So that's my advice. But other than that, I'm done unless you guys have any questions. Question time. Very good question. And then it's a very important question, and that's the most common mistakes. Good thing that you asked. So the way to handle that situation. So let's say you are reading a question, you picked option C, but the actual answer was A. When you read the explanation, first you read why A is right. So you're going to spend on the explanation and A is right, and you're going to take some notes. Now, when you take a notes, you just don't write down everything. You only write down when you read and things that you never learned before. If you already know, don't write it down. Because when you write down, the notes become so much and people don't go back and review that. So you only write absolutely that you never heard that before. So you're going to spend time on reading A. Once you're done reading A, then I will scroll down to option C and read why did I go wrong? When do you think C is the right answer? The minute you read the C, then you understand, okay, I did this wrong because I paid attention to this. That's why I went wrong. So in that particular question, reading A and C is more than enough than the other options, because the other options was not part of your differential. Your mistake was. So this comes under 50-50, what I call, right? Two options and that. So I've spent time on those two options. Would I completely ignore B, D, E? No, I will just read through faster to know what it is, but my most focus will be A and C. Why did I go wrong in here, right? So that's what I will think and do it. So always the two closest answer. When you read it, you might see, oh, I didn't say pescavus, it was pectus excavatum. So that's where I went wrong in this. So always pay more attention to the two close option than reading everything, because you should be reading everything, but these are the two you spend more time than the rest of them.
Sorry.
And taking notes, and after taking notes, sorry, Carrie, and the most important is to review that notes next day. There is so much to how to do UWorld. I could talk all day along how to do UWorld, and it's a separate session I do to my student. After we finish 6 weeks, I meet with them alone again to tell them how to use resources, because if you don't use the UWorld properly, it's done. Because there's a method, how many times you recall, how do you review, how to take notes. A quick example I'll give you. There are two ways of taking notes. One is writing down as a paragraph, the other one is a points form. Studies have shown when you take a points form, you tend to go back and review and more succeed than writing paragraph, because when you write paragraphs, folks, nobody wants to go back and review, right? So I tell my student to take points form notes. So there's so much into that. But to your answer to your question, those two options is the key. Go ahead, Carrie.
Sorry. You have your prometric centers. We don't have any in Poland, from my understanding. Most of the students who have taken it in Europe have either gone to Milan, they've gone to Croatia, they've done one in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, or again, if you have any form of references of coming back to your home state, you might have a prometric center in your home state. So it really just depends on when you decide to take it and where you're going to be at those times. But wherever you decide to do it, just make sure that you are going to be comfortable and you're going to be able to get a good night of sleep before the exam. So that I just want to answer that question.
Now, see, the only thing I would add to that point, when you apply for the step 1 application, they ask you the region. If you put a region of Europe, then you have to take it in Europe. You cannot take it in North America. So it's all about selecting the region. If you want to change a region, then you have to read the application process again, right? But other than some of the students ask, is it important to take it in the US? Does it give a different scoring? No, it's not. It doesn't matter where you take. It's the same day that counts. In October 24th, how many people took USMLE around the world? Does that make sense, folks? So that's how it counts. It doesn't matter where you take or anything. And I always tell you, take it where you feel comfortable. That's the most important, because that anxiety and new place. I always tell people, if you are taking an exam, if you can wake up in the morning and go from your own place, is the best. I don't like people traveling, staying in a hotel for 2 days and taking the test, because you are going to a new place, you are accommodating. Sometimes you can't sleep properly in the new hotel. It's a new location, those things. I don't like that. It's always good to go where you are more used to. That's what I do. Okay, so but sometimes you have no choice. I had a lot of students from Poland who took my program and passed the exam. I remember some student has to go to Germany, but then I tell them, in that case, go like 4 days before, get used to that location and the hotels and everything. Because one of the important things is, no matter how well you studied, if you can sleep the previous night properly, you are done next day. You see, that's painful, right? After all the hard work, one night's sleep can ruin the test, because if you don't get a good sleep and you wake up tired, it's not going to be good. You could take USMLE anytime after 2nd or 3rd year, okay? So in fact, there are 2 ways of application process to USMLE. If you are a student, you submit different application. If you are a graduate, you go through a different process. But you could take it anytime as soon as you finish 3rd year, I believe. In United States, 2nd year. You see here, step 1 is our 2nd year final exam. When we finish basic science, we take that exam to go to 3rd year. That's what it is.
Another question we have is, which year should you start studying for step 1?
After 3rd year.
Okay, what else?
After 3rd year will be the optimal time, because you don't forget too much of 1st year and 2nd year. Studying on the 5th year, still you can, but then you have to go back to anatomy, histology, biochemistry, right? So that can become a little harder. But I think as soon as you finish pharmacology and pathology, you could start.
How would you recommend balancing university and preparation for STEP?
No, answer is no. You cannot. I'll tell you, I don't want to mention the name. I had a student from Poland who tried to take the classes and also took my program. It took a long time to pass the exam, and I don't recommend that, because when you take my program, if you're going to go to university once a week or twice a week just for 2 hours, it's different. But if you have to go every day, that's different. No, I want 8 hours for the student to just spend on step 1 preparation. If not, it's going to drag for a long time, folks. Tell them is, you could take the program while you attend the class. Let's say the 6 weeks of program, you could take it. But as soon as you are done with that 6 weeks, you know, where you do UL full time for about a month or month and a half, that needs to be dedicated time where you don't do anything else. Okay, and I'm telling you, I had few students who goes to school and pass, but then at an atypical situation, it's not applicable to general people. That's why, you know, you might be one of those who could study and pass, but mostly it's difficult because you're going to be having double mind. You need to do work for your school. You need to study for step 1. Sometimes 2 different topics, 2 different things. Then it's hard. But some students, they say they are doing the 3rd year, which means you are also going to university to learn pathology and pharmacology. That means it can go together. It's a synergistic effect. One will help the other one. But if you are studying for step 1, we don't want you to do OB-GYN rotation. That's not going to help each other.
Would you recommend using first aid in conjunction with your study materials, so that way you at least have a first pass maybe prior to the summer?
Yes, that's a good thing to do. That's what we do in US medical schools. We have first aid from the day 1 of the class. We keep it next to it, whether we open or not, but we keep the book.
It's also what I did for studying. It actually helps a lot in your clinicals.
Well, I kept it in my first trimester, didn't even open it, but I kept it in my table to feel the sanity that I have the first aid. But it's good to start after physiology, because when you open the first aid, as soon as you open a little bit of anatomy and embryo, they jump into physiology. It's different to each student. Okay, now what I recommend, some student after the reviewing, they do 1 year, not 1 year, 1 hour step 1 question. So they do 40 questions in 1 hour, then review that. But then I also have some students who has a compulsive behavior. When they do a question, they want to know the answer, otherwise they cannot think for the next question. Then we do tutor time. You do the question, you answer, read the explanation, and then you move on to the next one. But those are temporary. But at the end of the day, you should be able to finish 40 questions in 1 hour and then read the explanation. That's the most common method I use to students.
Can you explain the difference between dedicated period and just studying?
Dedicated period and studying. So you could study for step 1 slowly, but the dedicated period means you spend about 2 months for yourself and you just study for step 1, nothing else you do in that. You wake up, study, eat, sleep, wake up, step 1, sleep, eat. That's it. That's what the dedicated period is. Any other questions? Do you have any foreign student who successfully got matched in the US? 90% of my students are foreign students, only 10% is US. And most of my students are matched, but most of them are in clinical rotation. Remember, most of my students take my course when they finish basic science. These are Caribbean students or any students, but then they are still doing rotations, right? But so many of them match and they are in a residency program. So meet with me one-on-one, and I just kind of want to understand the student, what they have done in preparation for step 1. You don't have to study or you have to go through, you know, one of the questions they asked me, do I need to go through UWorld and first aid before they start my program? Absolutely not. In fact, I don't recommend doing that, because you see the first aid, how it's written, And today you see how I went through Frederick's ataxia. It makes a difference. So I rather teach you how to study and then you go review and spend more time. It's more productive, and you try to spend 3 months on reviewing and then come to me and then still didn't do anything. So, most of the time students don't know how to use the first aid. And so my job is to show you how to use the first aid, right? So, the main requirements, answering to your question, are you, 100% motivated? Are you dedicated to study this and wanted to? Because, we don't like students taking our program, not taking the steps, because we want everybody to pass. And, that's what the requirements wise, nothing else is required. Like, it's not like you need to have this NBME. No, I simply like to talk to them. And, in one word, if I were to tell, I want to make sure I can get along with that particular student, because at the end of the day, this becoming like a boot camp. I became the dominant commander in chief, and I want the student to do everything what I tell them to do. Because if I tell you something and you do something else, then the results won't come, right? So that's why I wanted to make sure that I could work with the students. So the requirements is for me to see if I can work with them or not. That's what the key. It's not about any education or anything. It's better to keep 2 simple resources, first aid and you master it very well, than keeping 5 resources, but you're not clear with any of those, right? So after doing first aid and USMLE, there's so much you could do it. Like a good example, right? Frederick's ataxia, and we did 3 questions. What else can you learn from a different resource? Right? So knowing first aid and USMLE is more than enough. Again, I want to be very emphasizing that how much you break it down, how much you learn from that. If you take an NBME exam, every question and answer, you could find it on first aid. But where it's written and how it's hidden is the mystery there. But it's in the first aid, folks, okay? So that's the idea here.
Okay, guys, I think we've been at this for an hour and a half. So we want to
caffeine is dropping. All right.
We want to say thank you so much. I know it's late by you guys. You guys are probably very tired. So thank you so much again to you guys for coming to join us and ask all these questions. Thank you to Council of English Division Students of Poland for allowing us to talk to you guys. For those who are prepping for step 1, if you guys decide you'd like to come to our program, please reach out to us. Let us know when you apply. Again, this is not to coerce you to take our course, but if you do decide or you do want some help, please do reach out to us. We appreciate everything that you guys have asked us and that you guys have listened so attentively. So thank you so much.
Thank you.